When we started to explore this as a potential solution, then we started to see other benefits. So, this gives us, a potential tool to actually connect with our residents through their smartphone on mobility issues, and potentially even get data back to help with transportation planning. There's also a potential social equity piece in that a lot of people that utilize mass transit, they can't afford their own car. This is actually rewarding them. They are helping us by taking mass transit. It's giving potential additional rewards for doing that. And last, but certainly not least, is it could be a tool to connect with our local businesses. So if you're a frequent flyer on, United Airlines, you'll see that you can actually use your United Airlines miles to buy products from United's partner companies. We could instead actually use this to really point people to our local businesses. And so really, for this particular example, our role as a city is we are best positioned to engage our residents and engage our businesses to pull off leveraging this type of technology. There are a handful of cities that are already exploring this that we've been reaching out to and really understanding the challenges and the benefits they're receiving. And I would say most of them to this point have said the value that they're getting out of it, the revenue from increased ridership is worth it. So again, this is an example that under our Future Ready approach, we're looking at challenges, we're looking at potential emerging technologies, and we're currently working with our partners, so FDOT, Lynx, Metroplan, to analyze this and see, is this something that we want to continue to explore and potentially implement? So really just an example of some of the things we might look at. So some other updates that our Smart Orlando group has been working on over the past few months and will continue to do so. One of those efforts is around 5G and small cells. And I'm sure everyone's heard at least a little bit about the emergence of 5G and what that's going to mean to us as a city. And obviously here in City of Orlando, our economic development team and our planning team are really taking the lead on this. And based on my opinion from what I've seen of other cities, I think they're really at the forefront of planning out 5G and small cells. So that's big kudos to Doug Metzger and planning and economic development. But one of the areas that planning really has started to become concerned with a little bit is equipment congestion. And so with small cell equipment in our densest urban areas, that's where you actually need the most equipment. But that's also the place where we have the least amount of real estate. And so that picture you see, you can actually see City Hall on the left, you can see the Grand Bohemian on the right. You see that street light actually has a small cell on top of it, and then you see a little cabinet next to it. Well, actually not really a little cabinet. And so now that planning is starting to understand how many of these small cells are we going to have downtown in our dense environment, how many cabinets does that mean? So what our Smart Orlando team has done is really tried to assist them and look at, are there ways we can get in front of this technology and actually start to consolidate it and co-locate it? And I'm not sure if anyone from OUC is here, but OUC has actually really stepped up and helped us out here. So City and OUC are working with a consultant of OUC's to look at solutions to co-locate this equipment so that we're not cluttered with cabinets all around downtown. Another project we're working on with OUC is a smart streetlight pilot. So OUC issued a RFP for this smart streetlight pilot a few weeks ago. Proposals will actually be due later on this month. And if you're not familiar with smart streetlights, I would say in general, a streetlight is potentially a good place to deploy city-level technology. It has power, a lot of times it has communication, so it's a great place to sort of connect new technologies. So in partnership with OUC, we'll actually be able to look at how do these technologies work, how do they connect to streetlights, and then really start to understand, are there technologies out there that might help us as City of Orlando? Another place that our Smart Orlando team is helping out right now is around digital kiosks. I think I saw Thomas in the back somewhere. So our DDB CRA team is actually working on an RFP around digital kiosks for downtown that will likely come out this fall. And that can really help with wayfinding issues, connectivity issues, and all kinds of other things. So our Smart Orlando team has really been helping sort of from a technical guidance perspective. Water and wastewater, one of the things our Smart Orlando team really thought we should prioritize over the next handful of months, even before we finish our Future Ready Master Plan, is to really start diving further into some of our water and wastewater issues. So sustainability, public works, we're collectively working with them to look at, can we pick a city community center and have it just, go off the charts from a water efficiency perspective. Rick and team are really looking at what is the next evolution of technology at our wastewater treatment plants. Next item that our Smart Orlando team wanted to prioritize was around data policies. So we have various data policies in place right now associated with technology that we have right now, but we need to get out in front of what's coming in the future. We're being presented with all these technology options, these different kinds of data that we could potentially collect. So we really want to be prepared for that. And really the first question is this data that we want or not? We need to have a process to understand, is this data that we should collect or not? And if we do collect it, how do we manage it? How do we share it if it's supposed to be shared? How do we protect it if it needs to be protected? So our in-house legal team, our IT team, and myself are starting to work on sort of our next evolution of data policies to really prepare and be part of our Future Ready plan. And then the last sort of short-term update is around resiliency planning. So this was another area that our Smart Orlando team really thought we should prioritize over the next handful of months. So obviously we're very active and good in the resiliency space already, but what does the future hold? And so Chris and his sustainability team are very close to finishing what's called a vulnerability assessment and really starting to look at, okay, we're resilient now, but what is the future going to look like? What's climate going to look like in the future? What are the cyber threats that are going to happen in the future? And so, how do we write our next generation of resiliency plan to really get out in front of how the world is changing? And those pictures you see are just actually examples from my past life. So the pictures on the top, that's from Portland. They are concerned that they are overdue for the next big earthquake. And so they're really starting to think outside the box of how do we, if that earthquake happens, it's going to impact power lines. Not everyone can afford a backup generator or jam a Tesla Powerwall into their closet. So how can we really think about preparing our residents? And so they're looking at solutions, like plug-in batteries for your apartment that are actually owned by the utility, so that people get free resiliency, but the utility actually gets benefits on the renewable energy side. They're looking at central charging stations. That thing in the upper left is called a prep hub. It's something that was invented by MIT. It's a mixture of public art, but also resiliency, and that if there's a disaster, you need power, you can go there, you can plug in your phone, there's actually communication, so you can actually see what's going on. So, I'm not saying we're going to use these solutions, but it's just ideas of we want to look at the next evolution of resiliency, but and so we need to just analyze what are some of the technologies out there that might help us. And then those bottom pictures are actually from Fujisawa, Japan. So probably a lot of people did this when Hurricane Irma came through a couple summers ago. I mean, I was one of those people stuck in line at Publix waiting to get canned goods and water. So in Japan, they've thought about that. They've been through a tsunami. They actually, that community center in the bottom left, it actually serves as food storage for the community, right inside the community, so that they're not scrambling to the grocery store when a natural disaster is about to happen. And that picture in the lower right is actually a park bench that converts into a barbecue grill. So you can literally get food from your community center, cook it on your park bench, and wait out and have food after natural disasters. So again, these are just potential examples, but we're really committed to kind of thinking more holistically about the future of resilience planning. And so last, but certainly not least, I wanted to touch on this Future Ready Master Plan that Charles and I have mentioned a whole bunch of times here this morning. We issued an RFP a few weeks back. We have received 13 proposals, and we are currently in the process of evaluating all these proposals. You will very likely see me in a few months, this fall at some point, to propose on a consultant that we'd like to hire to help us develop our Future Ready Master Plan. And then after that, we're really targeting a 6-month schedule to develop that initial Future Ready Master Plan and roadmap. So, really what everyone should be prepared for is this is just the intro, this is the primer. Once we get rolling on this effort, there's going to be a lot of community outreach, stakeholder engagement, briefings with you all. We're all going to have to work together on this Future Ready plan starting later on this year and really picture it being complete late spring, early summer next year. And really just to give you some examples, Charles sort of rolled through our foundational elements and pillars earlier and why we picked those. But now we really want everyone to start thinking about what does Future Ready mean to us, and what are the things we want to analyze in each of these pillars and elements. And so we put one example for each one. In reality, we're going to look at lots of things in each one of these categories, but really wanted to just go through some examples to sort of get everyone thinking about what does this mean? What might we be looking at? So one of the foundational elements was community infrastructure and connectivity. One of the issues with connectivity is some people can afford different levels of connectivity over others, and how can we start to solve that? How can we solve the digital divide so that everyone has connectivity, so every student can connect to the internet and be able to do their homework? How can we leverage new technology to solve the digital divide? That could be one area we focus on among many areas in the connectivity space. Civic engagement and digital services. So from a civic engagement perspective, think about how fast technology is going to continue to grow. That's going to change the job market. And so how do we prepare ourselves as a city? How do we prepare our residents for what the future job market is going to look like? What does the future of work look like? And we've done a lot of great work in that space already. We've got UCF downtown campus opening, but we have to continue to really stay on top of the future of work, in my opinion. Public safety. How can we leverage technology to potentially make our buildings safer? And there's a lot of different ways we could potentially do that. And one example, actually, it says improve situational awareness there. So if you walk through City Hall, you'll see a lot of the rooms actually have occupancy sensors. So if we were able to leverage that data during an emergency, it could be very valuable to the fire department. They would know, if we could give them the feed on the occupancy sensors, they would know where people are in the building and be able to get to people, and not be in other parts of the building. Not saying we want to do that. It's just an example of some of the things we might look at. Affordable housing, underbuilt environment. So, everybody talks about smart cities and they immediately go to technology. Well, one of the things I actually spent a lot of time on in my past role was how can we leverage technology to help with the affordable housing issue? And so this was actually work in Northern California, where the affordable housing crisis is probably far worse than it is in any other part of the country. But there are some new technologies that are emerging that can really drive down the cost of housing and potentially help everybody solve affordable housing needs by leveraging technology. So that could be something we look at. Energy and utilities. I mentioned resiliency. A big key there is we could be looking at how do we make resiliency equitable. As I said, not everybody can afford to have their own generator. Not everybody, after the hurricane came through and knocked out power for a week, can afford to go to a hotel. So how can we sort of make that a more equitable approach? And really, there's really a convergence here with our renewable energy goals of how we can leverage our renewable energy goals, tie that to resiliency, and make our community more resilient for everyone from an energy perspective. And then the last one I'll touch on, transportation. Charles talked about that a lot. Right now our transit systems are a little bit siloed. So if you want to ride a Lynx bus, you might open the Lynx app. If you want to ride Sunrail, you go to a Sunrail ticketing platform. If you want to do bike share, you open that app. So a lot of cities are starting to develop what they call multi-mode transit apps. So I can book a trip from point A to point B. It may include a bus ride, a train ride, and a bike ride. It's all one payment, and it gives me directions, the entire step of the way of how to get to point A, from point A to point B, leveraging multiple transit options. So again, those were just examples of some of the things we might look at. If you wanted more, we could be here all day. I don't know if you want to do that though. So to really just summarize our workshop today, as I mentioned very early on, smart city, this term has come out because of the explosion of technology, but just keep in mind, it's not all about technology. We don't just want to buy, the next shiny object, because it's probably not going to solve all of our problems. So we really want to go through this Future Ready Master Plan and think about how we're going to leverage technology and be prepared for the future. Charles, Chris Castro, and others, I think, have done a great job over the last few years. We've accomplished a lot. We've set a great foundation, and now we're going to be working to really formalize our Future Ready Master Plan. As I said a few minutes ago, expect us back in a few months with a proposed consultant for that Future Ready Master Plan. And really, honestly, everybody should be prepared. We're really going to be focused on community outreach, stakeholder engagement, working with you all to develop a plan that's appropriate for City of Orlando. So that's our workshop.
Thank you, Mike and Kevin and Charles, for the update. I truly believe in the next decade that there's going to be a real separation among cities in America and regions in America, and those that take advantage of technology and the applications that we don't even know are coming are going to move ahead, and a lot of cities are going to end up being left behind. So we want to be in that group that moves ahead. So thank you for that presentation. Commissioner Sheehan.
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to ask. I know this is getting cars around is not usually what we're interested in, but one of the things that I hear people have said about is, the light timing, and I know that's computers. And so as part of this, is there a way, I'm on the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, and if we get our lights timed in the city, that doesn't necessarily help with getting the lights timed in Winter Park and to Maitland, to where we're getting people, around more efficiently. So is that part of this, trying to figure out how to get that technology working together with other municipalities and other counties?
It certainly can be, and I'll let Charles answer that one because he understands a lot of the history in that space.
Yes, Commissioner. One of the two foundational elements, I could rephrase it another way, it's information communications technology. And in Central Florida, what we're actively doing with the leadership of the Florida DOT and MetroPlan Orlando is getting all the jurisdictions to interconnect their fiber optics. Billy Hadaway's team is doing a great job of that. City of Orlando is a leader in that. So once we make sure that we have interconnected, redundant, robust, resilient fiber optic systems, we can get closer to having a seamless transportation system across the borders of our different jurisdictions in Central Florida. We're very much on the way. Orlando, Seminole County, Central Florida Expressway are among the leaders here with that.
Commissioner, I just had a conversation with Billy in transportation about being able to set lights in different frequencies for different times of the day, because what you need at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning is different than what you need at 10 when you're sitting at a light and there's nothing, you're the only one at the light and you sit there for a minute. So a lot of improvement could be made with technology, I think.
Absolutely. And I had another, I just was watching the presentation. It seems Thomas wants a digital kiosk for communication, and we've got these cabinets for 5G that could be a problem. Is there any way to combine the kiosks with the cabinets so that way you don't have you don't have so much real estate taken up, so we can, and maybe we can get AT&T or some of the communications companies to pay for some of those kiosks?
Yeah, there absolutely is. So as we're working on our co-locate study, the first part is understanding how much stuff is there. At the same time, we do have this RFP under development, so we really just need to overlay those.
Then there might be options to use those with the main streets. I've got a problem with leafleting for club bands all over Mills Avenue. Maybe we can get the 5G people to put up kiosks that the band kids can use, or information that we can load that onto, and that way we won't have the litter all over the. And those are some real life solutions that I can point to in my district. I can say technology, blah blah blah, and people check out because it's over their heads and it doesn't benefit them. People want actual things that are going to benefit them. So I think talking about access to marginalized communities, these things, I think you need to have something that people, if you want people to be engaged, you're going to have to give them something that they're interested in. Because like I say, this is this is actually PowerPoint's a 1990s technology. I wish we would find a way to communicate that, sells it and involves people better.
Yep.
Thanks.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you. Let me follow up on the idea about transportation. And it really goes to the point of how we partner with other high-tech companies. As an example, the hottest thing on transportation today is using Waze. Waze uses Google that sends guys down streets that they shouldn't be sent down. We have issues in my district where we want to restrict traffic, especially in terms of trucks, and trucks are going down residential streets because that's the fastest way, according to Google, from one to another. How are we partnering with those kind of guys to make sure that while we're handling issues with internally that we can control, that we're also making sure people can go through our community in a way that's effective?
Commissioners, tough question and would have a lot of discussion, but let me suggest this. One of the things that we did when we created our Central Florida Automated Vehicle Partnership is we realized that the technical folks like me would not have the answers to everything. So we partnered with the University of Central Florida, and we expect, and they have committed to have their School of Public Affairs work with us on issues like that, so we can have them developing policy that would work with the technical side of things. So these types of discussions could go on. It's not just about efficiency with mobility. It's about, context, and protection of communities and so on, protection of pedestrians, facilitating modes such as pedestrian movement and bicycles and so on. How do we do this best? And sometimes it's not best for the engineers to do that. That's why we're partnering with UCF. We also have as junior partners the Florida A&M College of Law and others, because we realize that some of these things require policies that would go beyond our jurisdictions or jurisdictional limits, and because drivers and others have habits that would be used not just in the city of Orlando, but in Winter Park, Orange County, and across the state. So we need to develop policies that our neighbors buy into, and policies for which we can advocate at the state legislature level, and so on. So that's why we've partnered with those folks to try to deal with some of these more difficult issues.
I agree with you. That's a broader answer. I guess the question I'm asking is, how can we work with Google to geofence areas based upon the type of equipment, type of vehicles they're driving? I've got guys, and this is just the example of how our city works. I've got guys driving in my neighborhood in an obvious place that's marked for no trucks, but they're being sent there by trucks. The result is we had to go back and fix the intersection to allow for trucks. Now, doesn't that seem like that's a little crazy? And that all of a sudden that where we don't want trucks, we're now having to create an intersection that allows trucks when in fact we don't want them there. So how do we stop that? When we find that when we interview trucks, they're being sent there by Waze and by Google. And so I know that we geofence for bikes. I know we can geofence for scooters. So I guess I'm asking, that geofence is a partnership issue. It's not a policy issue. It's a partnership issue.
So Commissioner, to answer that question specifically, yes. There are ways, such as working through Metroplan Orlando's TISMO, Transportation System Management and Operations Group, to work with groups like Waze and so on a regional basis to make sure that we establish truck routes and so on that we can get people to adhere to and share that information across borders. I think TISMO, Billy's group works well with TISMO. They're represented there. I think that's the best avenue to work on, to work with Waze. I think there are data sets and so on that we acknowledge that we can't manage ourselves, that we need to work in partnership with folks in the private sector on, and that's one possibility
Yeah, I understand.
to trigger that.
Other question is, which I'm really excited about seeing, is the idea of the frequent user app. possibly for Sunrail. I know that we're getting ready to have that Sunrail come back on the responsibility of the local governments. We need to figure out how to promote that. And what I really like about, I guess, it's one of those crazy ideas where everybody gets surveyed about something, nowadays. But if you have your most frequent riders, we really need, part of the justification for extending use of Sunrail is to have some good solid data about whether they'll actually use it on weekends. If they'll use it on weekends and they'll pay for it, then we're okay with that. To make that gamble is a little bit more difficult gamble. So having this frequent kind of user be able to kind of survey back to, say 8 or 10,000 people who would be available to be that core of people to use on the weekends, I think would be a really good asset to us, especially as we take on some of this role. Now they have an app now, so the question is, it brings up the second part of the partnership. How are we identifying those who have those kind of apps that we can partner with internally? In other words, to do a frequent rider on Sunrail seems to be like a no-brainer. But you also have Lynx as a system as a frequent rider, and then you have other choices that you have. It seems to me that this partnership idea could move pretty fast.
Yeah, and we're honestly exploring all the technology options that are out there to do this. I'm actually running them all on my smartphone and testing them all. So we're looking at the options that are out there, and certainly agree with you that it's a great way to connect with people and get more data. So if we want to understand how many people are going to use it on Saturday, we can certainly do that if we have the right technology in place. So
that's where, I think the long term is we have to figure out an additional revenue stream. And part of that revenue stream is getting more people during the weekday and also the opportunity of using it for other special times. And so how would you accomplish that? But you end up looking at Sunrail has got their app, Lynx has got their app, and Uber and Lyft have got their app, so does Mears. They're all involved in public transportation. How do those come together in such a way to serve the citizens of Orlando? That would be the greater question.
Yeah, I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but it's honestly through artificial intelligence, we can start to understand what's happening with all of those services. So really the technology that's out there in this frequent flyer space is using AI to figure out which of those you're using to bring it all together.
Yeah, it seems to me like you need kind of a Trivago idea that gets access to all those things. Does that make sense to you? An overarching kind of umbrella that gets access to those, because if you got a frequent flyer for American and then United and go down your list, but you still want to know what flights are available, you got to kind of go to another location that does that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your work.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. Still above my pay grade right now, so I would hope, saying that is to state that hopefully, how long is it before the RFP is out?
The RFP actually went out. You're talking about for the Future Ready Master Plan? Yeah, the RFP actually went out. We've received proposals. We have our selection meetings coming up. So we're looking to have a preferred consultant and come to you all this fall with the proposed consultant and contract.
Okay. I guess my where I was going with that is that it would have been nice if staff or yourselves could have met with each commissioner prior to, it's too late for that RFP piece, but if you can, at least with myself, I would like to do a deep dive on smart cities and future ready. I love the term future ready, so I can understand more about it and how I can better communicate to my constituents on what's moving forward, and then understand from them what some of their needs are, so I can convey it to you all as we choose a consultant to make sure that each district commissioner constituent needs are being met by that specific consultant that you may choose, eventually we may choose. because for me, of course, I was glad to hear you at the end, that you got around to it and then you brought it on home when you start talking about hearing the voices of the community, making sure that those things, the digital divide and broadband and Wi-Fi, and being specific with certain demographics, knowing that some marginalized neighborhoods, you know, Sunrail is huge, but when you're over in Ivy Lane, the Sunrail isn't that important, right? But other transportation needs are, and connectivity. So I would love for you all to meet with us so we can specifically help you put a blueprint together for our districts. At least I would. There was one other piece I wanted to talk about that I didn't see in your chain that I think is very important, and I hope that we focus on as we become future ready, is to prepare training and job opportunities for our future ready city. When we talk about installation, those are jobs. When we talk about maintenance, those are jobs. But what's most important is making sure that folks are trained here in our area so that they'll be prepared as we bring certain things on board. So I would like to help with that. Training is huge, and identifying who we need to train these folks to become ready to be these installers, installing the charging stations and different things throughout the city. So I do want to focus on that, and I see we did not focus on being prepared and ready. Nothing bothers me more than when we have things come on board and we don't have certain people, I would say it, those that need high-wage jobs. If we can start training them 3 years out, they'll be ready once we're ready to bring on these future-ready opportunities.
Yeah, and we are certainly going to be focused on that. Again, we were trying to give the brief version here. We can certainly do a deeper dive, but yeah, to us, that terminology that we've been using, Charles and I, is the future of work, and really thinking about what our jobs going to look like in the future, what jobs are going to get displaced, and how do we prepare for that. So it's certainly on our radar to discuss during the Future Ready Master Plan.
Commissioner, I would add that recently at a national forum at which we were in attendance, we were pleasantly surprised to see that our Economic Development Department in the city of Orlando had distinguished itself nationally as being one of the leaders looking at the future of work, the implications of things like this. I was shocked and just beaming. I'm not in economic development, but I was pleasantly surprised and just felt proud of our Economic Development Department. It was one of the first in the nation to be thinking through the implications of this.
Awesome. I'll get with the ED and see what we can do to continue that. Thank you, Mayor. That's
Commissioner, I saw a stat not too long ago that said in 2030, 70% of the jobs that will exist haven't been created yet. So workforce is going to change for sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, were you really surprised? We have the best economic development department in the whole nation.
Well, it was a forum led by folks from Harvard and Columbia University, and
Still.
we're talking about Boston and New York and so on, who talk a lot about themselves. And Mike and I were blown away when they said City of Orlando's Economic Development Department, and then they showed studies comparing us with other cities, and I was there smiling.
Hey, UCF is in the house. What are you talking about? Harvard? Anyhow, I appreciate those comments, though. It makes us all proud. The other day, I called Uber. I had a flat tire, had to get Uber, and a Tesla came to pick me up. I was very surprised. But what was even nicer was that the guy showed me what this vehicle can do. They're autonomous. They can drive all over the place. And he was hands off. I was like, could you please put your hands on the steering wheel? But it was fun. In talking about this, and it really, I get excited about these conversations because this is what we're living in. The technology is here. It's us transitioning into that. And one of my biggest concerns is, as you were talking about safety, we're talking about hackers from Russia hacking into our national headquarters computer systems in terms of different parties and whatnot, and that's a big concern of mine. As we move forward in technology, What measures do we have in mind, or what are we doing to make sure that that's in front of us? How to avoid these hackers to disrupt the technology that is we're implementing.
So this challenge is being handled on several fronts right now. Rosa might be most capable of telling you what the city's doing with that comprehensively from a technology management perspective. She's also very involved nationally. She and her team are very well respected nationally in that space. What I can tell you also is that on a national level, the U.S. government is actually focusing on that with our Central Florida Automated Vehicle Partnership as to hacking vehicles and so on. We have UCF on our team, not just the civil engineering guys, but the computer engineers and the computer scientists. And we have been working with them to sponsor hackathons. They are known nationally to be winning a lot of these competitions, looking at things, challenges in this space. So there's a lot more I could say about that, Commissioner, but it is a strong area of focus. When we put our Central Florida Automated Vehicle Partnership together, that was one of the things that was central to our mission, trying to make sure that we didn't just have physical security, but we had cyber security as well. And we're pretty confident that the guys at UCF will complement our team very well with that. But there is a significant national focus on this with automakers and with the government and with NIST to make sure that we provide that protection.
Well, so is the Pentagon, and they get hacked every so often. So that concerns me, because when it comes to technology in the transportation field, we're talking about lives. People driving out there, all of a sudden, system get hacked, and all these things go all over the place. Anyhow, that's something that I would really like to be maintained abreast to make sure that as we convey this information to our constituents. I guess we won't be able to give them a total sense of security, but we can tell them what we're doing. The other question I had, and piggybacking on what Commissioner Stewart mentioned, implementation of the part of the technology that pertains to government, at least the initial investment, will be very expensive, very expensive. And my question is, have we figured out how are we going to create a source of revenue for the initial and further implementation of this technology?
You're referring to the frequent flyer
Frequent
approach?
flyer, all this, anything and everything that has to do, for example, our transportation system, in order to interact with the 5Gs. As we move forward, also in law enforcement, I would imagine we're going to get into the field of drones and all these different things. So,
Yeah, so part of this Future Ready Master Plan is actually a roadmap. And when we say roadmap, that's actually a pretty detailed assessment. So, we want to first sort of understand high level what are our goals and, what are we trying to achieve. But as we start to get to the roadmap piece, now we're going to start to analyze things very specifically. So what does it cost? What are the benefits? What's the initial investment? Are there alternative business models, whether it's a public-private partnership or some other model to be able to roll out that technology without a lot of upfront city money? So, what you're saying is actually something that we're really intending to tackle in that roadmap piece. And the roadmap is really sort of timed out as we start to analyze things very specifically and pick the things that we want to do sort of short term, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's something we can actually use for our city budgeting process. So that's really the kind of the driver behind that roadmap and detailed analysis of different solutions and how do we actually fit them into our budget if they make sense for the city. So that's something we'll be working on, honestly.
And part of this is a paradigm shift that's been going across the globe, Commissioner, which is instead of investing in the expensive equipment, you get the manufacturer to provide the equipment, provide the service instead. So we're not, investing in that expensive equipment, but just paying for the service, which would be a lot cheaper in many respects.
you're right. This is a global issue, But just like you said that we have been recognized nationwide as being the city who's moving forward, I expect us also to recognize what those sources are before anybody else, so we can show everybody else how to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ings?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike and Charles, thank you guys so very much for your presentation today. But looking at the master plan and the roadmap that you spoke about with the updates and everything, can you elaborate a little bit more in reference to water and waste water and net zero water and solid waste management and waste to energy, and how that really applies here with the smart city and also future-ready efforts?
Yeah, technology is really exploding in every space, including in the water and wastewater space, from, sensors and different technologies to filter and reuse water. So we're actually very early on in those discussions around water. We know, and I don't want to speak for Rick too much, but at some point we're going to have to evolve on to the next technology for our wastewater treatment plant. Those plants don't last forever, so we're really starting to think now, what are the new technologies coming down the road that, as we start to upgrade our wastewater infrastructure, what might that look like? What are the new technologies that we can implement? And then it also ties into our sustainability goals around water efficiency and water usage. So,
On the stormwater side, Commissioner, understanding storm events, anticipating what's going on, managing lake levels, interconnections between lakes and so on, looking at concentrations of different contaminants going into lakes and so on, anticipating, responding quickly, being, resilient and so on. Those are some of the types of things we'd be looking at. Water consumption, working with OUC, trying to continue to reduce wastewater, increase reclaimed water. We have an aquifer problem that we need to try to deal with. All these types of things, we can bring smart technologies to help to manage better, and not necessarily expensive technologies, not necessarily the most modern technology, but looking at the challenge first and bringing affordable technologies to try to manage these things.
Okay, because I know we've been looking at waste to energy and those particular efforts for quite some time now. But as you're kind of in this planning stage, that this is talked about even more so, and specifically how it's going to benefit the overall public in a savings, and specifically just being energy efficient in so many ways. So I was looking for maybe some more tidbits as you all were discussing these particular issues, and maybe there was something on the horizon that you could speak about specifically for waste to energy. That's all. That's just a statement.
Commissioner, we'll in our individual briefings with commissioners, understanding your individual concerns, we will come with information that will make you proud of what the whole team is trying to do to benefit the city.
Thank you.
And also to listen to your input.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
thank you.
That concludes our workshop for today.
Great job.